Thursday is a brand that's seen rapid growth during their 5 years in business. A Kickstarter success story, they've paved the way for other direct-to-consumer brands. This success has attracted not only dedicated fans of the brand, but a fair amount of criticism as well, with a fair amount coming from yours truly. I recently met with Connor, one of the founders of Thursday, to address some of the misconceptions about the brand and their products.
What makes Thursday different than any other outsourced Goodyear welted shoe? You don't actually make them here, they're being made somewhere else. And there's a lot of companies that do that, so what makes yours different than somebody else's?
That's partly true. We actually did make shoes in Manhattan. So one thing that, in the long course of our 5 years in business, we've actually made shoes in multiple factories, and it's part of what we do that is unique. Let me start though by answering the question, what is it that makes Thursday unique, and how is our approach different from other brands? I think it really kind of goes back to why we started the company in the first place. We were grad students at the time trying to find that perfect blend between something that was going to be comfortable, that was going to be durable, but really also versatile enough for daily use. The choices on hand were either really expensive, really uncomfortable, or it was something that just didn't make sense for someone who had to go to a work meeting now and then to go to social function later. You got a date and it's raining. We wanted something that was really going to kind of cover you on a daily, everyday basis, and that's part of why we called it Thursday. So our first part of the company and what we do differently starts with the function. We're really trying to solve a problem for our customers, which is I need a reliable, great, everyday boot that I can wear in almost any kind of setting, and I want to get great value for it, great quality, and I know that I can rely on it. That's evolved as we've grown the business to also include other things. I think one thing that we really focus a lot on now is we're really focused on finding partners that can also help us achieve those goals, and that becomes a really big part of it, whether it's making sure that we're sourcing from really good providers of the highest quality materials or using the best partners who can actually manufacture and build those. That's what we're really focused on. My personal thought as a consumer and someone who wears boots on a daily basis is I don't really care as much about like the specifics of where this office may be or where that may be. I care immensely though about the quality, I care immensely about the values that go behind the construction and why things are designed the way that they are. So from the get-go, our approach was always, look, we're going to approach this with our customers are the number one thing that we're focused on, and then from there, we're going to continue to get better every single day. So we're really proud to say that what began as like a passion project, two people who were students, didn't know anything about shoes to start with, but just said, look, we're really ambitious and we're really, really passionate about this and we're going to figure it out in a very short span of time. We're fortunate to have really unlocked a lot of the keys to doing so, and we've been given permission by our customers to go out and do more, which is really kind of the dream.
You definitely had the timing right. It came along at the perfect time, and it filled a niche that nobody else was able to fill at the time. Really, I mean, there was your higher end, there was your junk in the mall, but there really wasn't anything in that sweet spot, and that's where you guys. I mean, it was opportunity and timing for sure.
It was that, and I think it was also like a real need. I think one thing we had thought about was, are we the only two people in the world that are having this single problem? And it turns out the answer was no. And part of it was because so many of the legacy brands had just sort of forgotten their customers. Part of that's the business model. You're doing a lot of wholesale business. You don't have the direct customer feedback that we get on a daily basis. These are large corporations that have a lot of people that are moving very, very slowly with many layers of management and focus groups. We're talking to our customers on a daily basis and like, let's run at it and go really quickly. I do think, at least for us, that kind of startup dynamism is really valuable because it'll actually results in faster iterations, more improvements, keep going faster, and we can also test and do new things, where I think that's also part of what's fun about this business in general. We have the permission to go out and try things that no one's ever done before, and the things that work allows everyone to just level up and get better. The things that don't work, you learn from it, you move on to the next thing. That's really been like what we're trying to do.
So a model like the Captain, which has been around since the beginning,
Yep.
How has it changed since the original version that was offered in Kickstarter and the one that people can buy today?
Yeah, I think one thing that people, it's funny, you can see some of our models have changed pretty dramatically because we've made more aesthetic changes. We've switched out the outsole, or we've changed the stitching or the colorways. I think the Diplomat, you probably see the most generous changes from an outsider's perspective. But the Captain looks almost exactly the same as when we first started, but the amount of changes that we've made there has been really dramatic. Not in a way that's going to affect the entire shoe, but really, I always call it like searching for that incremental 10% improvement, where if you can just kind of stack those layer by layer, you end up with a shoe that is multiple times better over time. each one of those little changes is really hard fought for. It's one of those things that it doesn't just pull itself out and announce itself and say, hey, this needs to be better. You only get it by being really insane about your product, spending a lot of time like wearing, thinking about it, talking about it, looking at it. It's being really close to your customers and listening to what they have to say, listening with open ears and really taking that to make improvements to the actual product. And then the third thing is really just getting into like the process. So I think one of the questions you had asked earlier is like, how are we different from other brands? I don't know what other people do, but we've since hired people from much larger companies who are also working at footwear companies for a long time. As they've come into Thursday and seen our process, the consistent comment has been, you guys are insane in terms of what you do from a detail standpoint. I personally spent 2 months in factories last year in Mexico. We're looking at stuff like the specific temperature on a machine to actually press the molding of the back counter to see if we can make it just a little bit more comfortable or a little bit more flexible. We're looking at stitches per inch. We're looking at the specific process that goes into one of these 80-plus steps to see how the shoe is actually manufactured. And rewinding that a little bit to how it relates to the Captain, the change that we've made to the Captain, one, so we originally had done a latex foam on the bottom in year one, which gave a little bit of comfort right out of the box, but over time it compresses. And then once it compresses, it doesn't reset. We didn't know that at the time. We were like, we're using a natural latex, that's nice, it feels really comfortable. But over time, we realized, you know what, this could actually be more comfortable in year 2, year 3 if we switch something into it. So what we did is we introduced pour-on. We now do 3 to 4 millimeters of pour-on, which is made by Rogers Corp. This is something that's good for 10,000 wears from them. It's something that has really high recovery factor, almost like a mattress memory foam. So when you actually sit down into it, your foot gets really, really comfortable. But then when you pull out, it ends up being something that just resets itself. So we like that. That's actually something that's an upgrade and also required us to spend more on the product, but we did it because we thought the net benefit was much higher. We also added things on like the actual footbed that went underneath it as well. Usually what you do is when you have a Goodyear welt construction, you have the underside of the insole, and there's a canvas ply rib to which you adhere the Goodyear welt, a leather welt that circumscribes the actual boot. And we shouldn't overemphasize, it's a small piece of canvas that allows you to adhere a leather welt to the shoe for a genuine Goodyear welt construction. That's why it matters. The other thing it does is it creates about a 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter cavity because it sticks up from the outsole, from the insole, and in that cavity you spread a cork mixture. So before you spread the cork mixture, usually you'll put like a steel shank on there. That creates some arch support and gives you a little bit of like an off-ramp for where your heel hits towards the arch of your foot. But the problem is that sometimes it's not as consistent as it could be because someone by hand is actually applying this, hammering it in, and off you go. It's something that, again, I think 99.99% of customers would never even notice. But we looked at it and we said, because shanks can come out and because like sometimes it's not quite put on as consistently as it should be, then you don't get all the cork that you need there or it's not evenly distributed. Well, what if we could make it so that that cavity is completely consistent all the time, that it's always 2 millimeters throughout the length of the shoe? What if at the same time we could also secure that shank so that's sandwiched within the insole so that it can never come loose, pop out, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually end up doing an integrated insole that has the shank integrated into it. Again, more expensive, but it's a better insole. Is it something that most people are going to even see or be aware of or care about? Probably not. But for us, we thought, look, this is better. It means it's more consistent. It's another thing that we can continue to focus on the next thing, so let's do it. Then you also have consistent cavity for the cork to fill. The next thing after that, we were looking at our cork mixture and we realized, granulated cork, like anything, over time, if you just kind of mix it and you play with it, you're actually going to have like parts of it that are going to be bigger and parts that are going to be smaller, kind of like sand, the way that it sifts. We went back to our supplier and we said, the problem with that is that sometimes you get really chunky and sometimes you get really thin. And again, if it's being spread on perfectly and done well, not a problem. But we want to reduce the risk of that. So we went back and said, we want to actually go and we want to filter this so that we're getting consistent size granules so that they're all the same. They're completely uniform. So now we have our own specific Thursday granulated cork, which no one else in our area is actually being supplied with, so that we can actually use that and apply it onto our insoles. So now you've got a consistent cork footbed, you've got an integrated steel shank, you've got pour-on built onto the insole, and all of that creates, again, is it super different? I would guess that most people don't even recognize the difference, but in my mind it's a shoe that's maybe 15 to 30% more comfortable. It's definitely more expensive, but we're fine with it because it's going to lead for a better customer experience, and if we do a great job with our customers, they're going to be happy as well. Other things we've done with the Captain that you won't see but also matter are outsole. Our outsole compound, when we first use it, was just off-the-shelf traditional rubber outsoles that you see from anyone else, and they're being supplied to any number of other brands. We went back and said, like, look, it's fine, but it's a little bit slicker on the snow than we want it to be. It's also one of those things where if we can make it more durable, we'd like to make it more durable. If we can make it more comfortable, so it has like a little bit of give on it, a little bit more shock absorption, we'd like that too. Some of these things are at cross purposes. You can't do one without giving up something on the other. But we've continued to go back and refine it, refine it, and refine it. And I think in different points, we definitely had points where it was too gummy or too soft. I think there are times it was too hard, really durable, but not something you'd actually feel comfortable walking around in. What we have now in our most current iteration, and we are going to continue testing this, but we have something that now is actually 3 times the tear strength of the industry standard, which means you can do 200 pounds pull strength. It's something that you'd have to like just have a machine to actually rip it. And for us, that's like durable, it's grippy, and it also has a little bit of softness to it. So these are those sorts of things that we're doing. We've gone and we had lamb-based leather liner. We put bovine liner as the glove-based liner on the inside. Why? It's a little bit more durable. They're both really, really soft, both really comfortable. Cost is not even an issue there. It's just that it's a little bit more durable. So we're going to continue doing stuff like that.
Being that there's been so many iterations and improvements and changes in one way or the other, people could own a boot from any point in that history. I myself bought a pair of the Chelsea boots back in 2-3 years ago,
Yep.
And it was that point in time with that sole. And do you think that in a way some of the pushback that you get is because of people who bought things at a certain point in time? And is it fair to hold the new stuff to the old? I mean, if I had to compare the new Chelsea boots to the ones that I've had, which in the beginning I really liked a lot,
Yeah.
and then over time they weren't as comfortable. The insole felt like it went flat.
Yeah.
Is it fair to compare the old versions to the new versions?
I mean, let's put it this way, right? Like, would you rather be working with a company who, or being a customer of a company that doesn't make things better or change things over time, or just kind of keeps it the same way it's always been? For us, it's always, we entered into an industry where a lot of the legacy players have been doing this for 100 years, like literally a century. And they're proud of the fact that they haven't made big changes to their business model, to the product. And on some level, I get the heritage and the, it's good enough for your grandfather. Our viewpoint is we have all this modern technology and new materials and better ways to do things. Why would you not try to do things better? And be transparent about it and talk about it with your customers. And I think we've done a fairly good job, maybe not the best job, at explaining what we're doing and why we're doing. Again, some of these things are so minute and so small that I don't think people even really notice them. But the way that we view it is that it's our responsibility to continually put out the best quality product we possibly can. And that means like every day working really, really hard for those incremental changes. So comparing like the old versus the new, I can say with very high confidence that what we're putting out today, I think is leagues ahead of what we put out 5 years ago. I also think what we had 5 years ago was phenomenal. And I think not just the quality on an absolute basis, but also the quality to value is phenomenal too. We take a lot of pride in the fact that we are taking on lower margins, that we are investing in the product itself in order to pass that value on to customers, because we think that long run, that is actually the best strategy. That's not just good for customers, it's also good for our business, and that's how we actually make a big dent in this market and change the way that things are done. So for us, like, yeah, we have respect for our own traditions, we have respect for how this industry has evolved, but we are here because we're excited about how much better things can be. Perfect. So yeah, so one question is like, what is it that having been here with 5 years of experience, like what is it that we know that we didn't know then, or what is it that really is different? One thing that I've been probably most surprised about is that for us, we actually design the shoes. I think what's sort of maybe an industry secret, but a lot of people go to factories, they hop on a plane, they point at some ones on the wall, they say, I'll take that, and then they repackage it and they stamp a brand on it, and then that becomes the idea. On the contrary, what we're actually doing is we're literally going in here and making minute, like millimeter by millimeter changes on the crown, the ball of the foot, starting with the last, because that's usually where like the biggest changes end up being, making those like very expensive investments that we actually own the last, we actually own the IP, that's really important to us. And we're actually getting in the weeds on this thing. So, and if that's on the design side of things, we're picking the leathers, we're custom developing leathers, whether it's with Horween or with Lafargue or Alphamex, like we're doing this all over the place. We are so involved on the details, and it's why we can speak intelligently about our product and authoritatively, where we know what's going on. And that actually ends up being a huge, in my mind, strength, because we're actually involved in doing it. Then on the actual manufacturing side of things too, we're not like, we have one factory and we visit again a few times a year. We're visiting, we have a team that's in place that's there on a daily basis, working alongside the factory itself to improve everything from the tension on the actual Goodyear welt machine, making sure that the temperatures on the lasting machine are correct, making sure that the timing is done properly, making sure that we're doing full tests on a weekly basis to ensure that we're actually up to our environmental standards, that things are being tested for any kind of materials that shouldn't be in there. Those are things that I just know that others are not doing. And again, fine, but for us, it's really important with what we're doing. So we're going to continue to do that and continue raising the bar. I do not think that we're perfect. I do not think that we're even as good as I want us to be, but I know that the future is going to be better. And the only way we can get there is by having that constant forward lean and saying, look, we're going to be as hard on ourselves as we possibly can so that in the end our customers get served and we get to continue doing this for 15 and 30 and 100 years ourselves. That's the kind of attitude that needs to be had. And I personally look at this, and I think there are too many people who, the way I would put it is that we work really, really hard and we care a lot. And it's in our best interest to continue pushing things forward as much as we possibly can. And everything that we've done in this short amount of time, it's nothing compared to what we're still going to do in the future. So I feel really, really good about what we're doing and why we're doing it differently.
Do you think that Thursday's aggressive advertising campaigns have affected the brand one way or the other?
So, I mean, I read the internet and I see, I think there's a lot of people that don't like advertising, and that's fine. The first pushback I'll give is like, we actually don't advertise as much as everyone thinks that we do. I think one thing that's been part of our secret sauce is that we're very good at finding people that are interested in the product to begin with, and we view advertising as part of building a business in this day and age. I definitely think that there's a weird bias against brands that do advertise, and especially in this industry. And part of it's because, thinking back to these legacy brands and why the business was the way it was very much a wholesale-focused model. And with that, you're getting a really poor value for your dollar as a consumer. So for us, one of the innovations that we bring with a direct-to-consumer model as a digitally native vertical brand is that we're able to come in here and we're able to reach customers more efficiently, and that allows us to invest more in the product and also grow the business so that we can actually achieve the scale that we need to compete with these big legacy guys. For me at least, and the only way I can I can't even prove this without showing numbers on it, which we don't do, but we actually don't advertise nearly as much as people think we do. There are a lot of other brands that are spending a substantially larger portion of their budgets on advertising versus us. Our actual total investment's small. The thing I hear the most that drives me up the wall is people saying, oh, they invest their money in advertising. We invest most of our money in product, full stop. And it's not by a little bit, it's by a lot more. Our biggest expense, full stop, is going to be in the product. Our next biggest cost is actually going to be in things like fulfillment, customer service, making sure that customers have the experience that we want them to have. And then we get down to marketing as the third biggest bucket. So I hear that, first of all, I think anyone who says that, one, doesn't understand the business, which, fine, but they just don't understand the math behind it. Secondly, I think the other thing that they're really hearing is they don't like the advertisement, right? People maybe don't like having this in their face. To which I say, okay, that's fine, but I'm going to keep showing beautiful boots and I'm going to keep putting those photos out in the world. I don't feel like I have a lot to apologize for. That said, if our customers come back to us and say, hey, I think that this wasn't correct or something, I totally listen to that stuff. But what I find most often is when I hear people complaining about the marketing, it's a way to critique me or to critique us without actually getting to the substance of the argument, which is, do you own the boots? Are the boots great? Are you happy with the purchase? If the answer to those is no, then I listen to that very intently. But if it's, I don't like your marketing, or I don't like that this person was wearing your shoes, it's hard for me to really kind of push back on that and say oh, okay, you're right. It's just a personal opinion. And by the way, if anything that we put out there, if someone doesn't like the jeans on the model, or if they don't like the setting that we put in for this boot, totally fine. People can have different opinions, and that's okay. But to simply try to dismiss a product based on advertising tactics or strategy, I just think it's really short-sighted. And I also think it's missing the forest for the trees. We're succeeding not because of our advertising. We're succeeding because of our product and because of the way that we treat our customers. I mean, so another example, I think, some folks I think don't like that we do some influencer marketing, and just the honest answer here is that, one, any brand in the 21st century is going to have to do some influencer marketing just as part of their total strategy. It's just become the standard. We're not the only ones who do it, and we're certainly not the ones who do it the most, What we do end up doing, we try to partner with people who, again, are really into the brand, where there's actually an authentic connection, where they bring something that's new versus what we wouldn't have. And a lot of it also for us is a way to get really good quality content. So, our boots are great, they're fantastic, but if we just keep them on a shelf and that's all you ever see of them, it's not very interesting. But if I can get them out in the wild and I can actually show them being used in real life, whether that's hiking on a trail or in an office environment or at an event, it's way more interesting. So for us, we look at it and say, like, we've got really cool people who work really hard, they're creative, they want to show these boots in a different light. That's a great way for us to work together and partner. So we're going to continue doing it. Again, if people don't like it, that's fine, they can tune it out. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual underlying quality of the product and how we treat our customers.
So in my years of doing this, which has been about 4 years now, right? I've been I've done positive reviews on Thursday. I've done negative reviews. I've been a critic. You know what I mean? I've had some laughs, and I've also had people share their stories with me. So I've seen things that came out that maybe shouldn't have, or maybe things that slipped past quality control, or something that was in one of those transitional stages. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I don't think you've been critical. I think you've been constructive, which is something I do appreciate. We're not perfect. I think that's like the first thing to start with, is that we are not batting 100. We work our tails off to be perfect, but we recognize that may never be possible. So anyone who says otherwise is just pulling the wool over your eyes, and you just shouldn't listen to them. From our perspective, it's you do the very best you can for the first anything. And if you do screw up, one is you own the mistake, and then two, you take care of the customer. So I guarantee that if you were actually to go through our long history and say, like, point out to the actual instances where things didn't go 100% to plan, we definitely had those things happen. What I think is way more interesting is how we responded. And this was even from the very earliest days, and we definitely do it now too, is you go back and you make sure you do right by the customer. So it's one thing if someone says, like, hey, I got the wrong boot delivered to me accidentally. Things like that can happen. There's carriers involved. There's mistakes that do get made. It's very, very, very rare. But when it does happen, how do you as a brand respond to it? Do you respond indifferently and not do anything? Or do you make sure that that customer is taken care of? Do you go above and beyond to actually make it right? We had one really almost notorious instance that happened where we had a gentleman who ordered a pair of our Vanguards, and what we shipped him, there had been an extra punch in the eyelet. And so we had an extra eyelet on one row, which, again, no idea how that actually happened, much less how it got past quality control, much less it shipped. But it did. We immediately said, look, our mistake, we're going to send you the next pair. Only problem was, this was the last remaining pair, period, in the warehouse. This is like a week before Christmas, busiest time of the year. He says, I'm going from New York to Canada. I'm getting my wedding photos taken. These are going to be part of this. And I need them, by the way, within 24 hours. All those things make it ultimately so much harder. We could have easily said, you know what, too bad, not going to do it, yada, yada, yada. We went and we effectively spent like $300 on this guy to get him the pair of boots that he needed in time for his actual wedding shoot. And again, one of those things where it could have been very easy to do the opposite. But for us, it was like the customer matters, and this is actually our way of like salvaging something and really saving the day. Our whole team is dedicated to doing that now. So from my perspective, it's like, yep, nothing's going to go 100% to plan. That's okay. One, we get better every day so that less and less things happen over time, which is, again, process and really just putting the work in and really just being on top of it. And two is making sure that when things are wrong, you fix them right away. So we take full responsibility on any of that. I think also the point you made on like some of the products, we're really big on innovation. Like we really want to try new things. I know, for instance, like we came out with a leather jacket, and I think you were fairly critical on it, which is okay. Some people love that same jacket, by the way, and it's for some of the same reasons why it was so difficult to manufacture. It's a really, really thick leather. So if you're a big motorcycle dude and it fit you right, you end up having like an awesome jacket that's almost like armor. And you saw how thick the leather was. It was intense. So it led to issues where it was hard to like do the stitching perfectly. It was hard to get the placement right on all the hardware. All those things, like, and again, anyone who had issues took care of them, but most people actually still enjoyed it. I still think some of your feedback on that was right. We took that and then we go back and we do the next iteration. So first version was good. Not as good as we wanted it to be in retrospect, but second version, much better. We will get more feedback from people who are going to say, I love this. Some people are going to say, I don't like this as much, and we use that to get to version 3. But the new jacket that we have is an example. We've got upgraded hardware on it, much cleaner stitching, We've got a much more flexible, softer Napa leather that we're using instead, increased the gauges on the zippers from a 5 to an 8, and the price point's actually better. Went from full polyester lining, which is really rough and tumble, by the way, actually really hard to actually break, to a cotton polyester blend, so it still actually breathes, but is still going to be durable. So those are things that, again, like I look at this and I think it's a dialogue. We're always going to do everything we possibly can to make the product as good as we can. And I don't have 100% information up front, but whatever we put out, we feel good about and we're proud of. And then next iteration, we're going to feel even better about. So that's the way that we think about it. And I kind of think that part of the problem with the legacy brands is they don't think that way. It's either very like test market approved or it's very in a box. For us, we want to go out there and see what else we can do. It's why we've done shell cordovan pairs. It's why we've produced pairs in the island of Manhattan itself. Making shoes in New York City is not easy, but we've done it. We try to do stuff like bags. We try to do stuff like wallets. And some of those have actually resulted in really good products over time. And we're going to continue doing it. And I think as long as our customers give us the permission to do it, we should continue doing it. But the number one thing is we're always going to take care of the people that take care of us. Yeah. I think about 90% of the reason you didn't like that jacket started from the thickness of the leather that we used. We got so excited about it. You know, you fall in love with this because you're like, this is so cool. This leather jacket stands up on its own. That's literally the case. Well, that doesn't mean it's a good jacket. It doesn't mean we should have done it that thick. But okay, we learn, and when we do the next iteration of it, it's going to be a thinner leather, and we're going to make this better. So
well, I'll disagree with you there. Yeah. It wasn't because of the thickness. I appreciate a good robust leather. I mean, same thing with denim, heavy denim. There's a certain appeal to breaking like something
the
in.
20 ounce, yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's an appeal to breaking something in, but my big problem was the finishing. You know what I mean? There were certain things that I saw where I was like, I can't have that.
The reason for that is because the leather was so thick, is what I'm telling you, from a manufacturer's standpoint. And again, this was our first run of jackets. So you're looking at the V1, small, and I think it was like a learning curve too, right? As you go and you produce more, you get better and better and better. We had a very, very short runway. We said, we're going to see if anyone else likes this as much as we do. Not fully understanding and appreciating that it's really hard to actually stitch leather when it's as thick as it is. So that was part of it. It made it hard to place the hardware. And it also, like, just even the fit, like the way that it actually goes, not being able to move your arms across is part of it. Yeah. I didn't even have one for me. The sizing, we didn't make one that was long enough for me to actually wear beyond the actual sample that we had. So that ends up being one of those things where, like, it's a very valuable lesson. I don't think any of our customers were left out in the lurch for that, where like people have come back, if they want a refund, we've taken care of them. Most people that had it came back to us. The reviews are actually positive. Those are public on our website. You can see what people said about it. And part of the reason they loved it is because it's so thick.
When it comes to the materials, and even one of the ads, it was saying something about made of the highest quality materials. What makes you confident to make that statement, which is pretty bold, especially the company that you're in?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing to talk about is that quality on some level is a little bit subjective. Like there's some times where just I prefer this type of leather, this type of leather. That especially is one where people kind of get hung up, right? There is a difference between really high quality and really low quality leather. But at a certain level, you can sort of just get to a point where I prefer A or B. But there are a lot of things that we're doing that are actually quantifiable, where I can actually say, like, definitively, we are selecting the top of the top or the creme de la creme. One of the easiest things is just starting with leather. All of our North American production we're using, unless we're using shell cordovan, which is incredibly expensive too, it's coming from North American hides. So that means these are actually being raised in the United States. Why does that matter? Other brands will use hides that are coming from Brazil or Argentina, and those are beautiful countries, and I like to visit them. But the problem is that they are more tropical, and so you have more bugs, and you get more bites, which means that there's actually more imperfections on the leather. So the reason we use U.S. hides is because it's more temperate, and because you have less imperfections in the actual hide itself. So that's something where we're paying a premium for the raw material in order to have higher quality material. We're also using tanneries that are either gold rated by the Leather Working Group or Horween in Chicago, which is someone that just has excellent environmental standards. What we like about that, though, is those same guys that are focused on the environmental stuff, it's not just that they're being safe for their workers and safe for the environment, it's also that because they have to hit those standards, they also have much more consistent quality product versus something that's being done in a dark, poorly lit, chemical leaking kind of tannery. And again, those things do exist, and we've been through them to see them with our own eyes. We don't do business with them. So for us, it's always about constantly improving the quality of the materials and the suppliers. Going even further on that, we did our single herd program this fall, which is literally an industry first. And that was where we found a single farm in Georgia, their cattle, to Horween in Chicago, to our factory in Arkansas, and used that to create the single herd Vanguard. So exclusive colorway, literally every boot that is bought in that line, which is already sold out, that actually is coming from a farm in Georgia. You know exactly where it's coming from, and that farm itself is actually a sustainable farm that is a carbon sink. They're actually pulling about 3.5 pounds of carbon out of the atmosphere for every pound of cattle they raise. So it's awesome. It's really, really cool. It's a very small part of what we do today, but we are hoping to expand and scale that because, again, I want to have a forward lean on this and keep getting better. So that's just on the leather side of things. Other things we also do too, when we are purchasing leather, Lafargue's one of our tanneries in Leon, we actually go and we're doing an A-B selection for that. Your usual is table run, which means you have certain A, B, and C, which you're going to get a certain amount of utilization. We're doing A-B selection, which means we're, again, paying a premium for leather that is going to be higher quality, so that we're passing that to the consumer. Other people, big brands that are purchasing from the same tannery, are literally purchasing what we have thrown away or said we will not buy. So that is something where I can say very definitively, we are using higher quality materials. And you don't have to believe me, but it's true. That's just what we're doing. There's other points there too where I think the method and what we're doing and like how we source those materials is really important. And again, I think there's still a lot of work to do for us individually and also the industry more broadly, but we're really trying to be very deliberate about what we're getting and why we're using it. I think one of the questions you had asked was about pour-on versus leather on the insole. Do you want me to address that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing that I do read a lot on is some folks don't like pour-on as an insole material. We use this actually as a replacement for we had a latex foam beforehand. Pour-on is a substantial improvement in comfort. It's expensive. It adds a cost for us. It's a way that we're able to invest in the product, though, to make it better for customers, so it's worth doing. I wear these boots every day, too. It's way more comfortable, full stop. We've actually done shoes with full leather insoles. We've also done with the Celtec plus the, it's by Texon, with the actual pour-on in it. We've done these side by side and then sold them side by side, and we're reading this customer feedback with every little bit of detail that we can get to see what people prefer. Across the board, the all-leather construction, which again is what all the legacy brands have been doing for a really long time, it doesn't rank as highly on comfort as the pour-on. And the reason for that, I think, is because ultimately leather, for all of its many magnificent properties, is not as comfortable as a footbed material as the pour-on is. And I think there are some people that just, again, either they're just not open to the idea of it, or they haven't tried the actual product, or maybe there's just a personal preference for leather. If that's the case, that's totally fine. We will continue to make new types of shoes in the future. We'll continue to probably have something that's going to be a leather construction or a predominantly leather construction so that those people have that option within our line. And we're also going to have the ones that we personally think are better and that most of our customers tell us is better from a comfort standpoint. We're going to keep doing that because that's how we operate. And it's okay. And what's also interesting too is I think there's this weird misconception that for some reason pour-on is a way to save money versus leather versus whatever. We might have insoles that are made of an entirely different material in the future if we can find something better, and we're going to keep testing, by the way. For us, the cost on that is actually the same, and it's just half of one or six of one, half a dozen the other. It's not even at all about that. It's more about what is best for the customer and what do we think is actually going to result in the best possible shoe. So it's frustrating for me because I do actually read some of these comments from people and I think, my goodness, you guys, this is crazy. And if you don't believe me, like the SSIA, which is actually like America's professional shoe cobbler organization, they did an internal poll and gave awards for the best shoe constructions. Thursday won for the best shoe construction under $200 for men's boots, which in my mind is like awesome. It's really edifying. I'm not a professional cobbler, but people that work with our shoes day in, day out, looking at what else is out there on the market, are looking at our construction and saying, this is the best construction within our price range. I think that's wonderful. And that's not to say anything negative about anyone else, but we do things really deliberately. We're trying to do what's best by the customer and what we think is actually best from a product design standpoint. And again, we're making these decisions. It's not something where we're just plucking something off of a shelf and trying to repackage it and remarket it. It's something that we are actually consciously choosing for reasons that we think are going to result in the best comfort. So for the next 5 years, we're really focused on our mission, which is bringing quality back to footwear. I think what's nice is that because before it was just two guys on a couch, with some savings and like a wish and a hope and a dream, we've since taken a lot of time and experience and blood, sweat, and tears, and we've converted that into a team that can help us go faster and further. We're not relying on one factory the way that we were in the early years. We have our choice among multiple factories around the world that are doing really amazing stuff. So now we can work with whoever's the best at doing dress shoes, we can work with them. Whoever's the best at doing a 6-inch boot, we can do that with them. Whoever does a really nice women's Goodyear welt construction, we can do that with them. So I think our capabilities are actually improving and growing over time. I think that allows us to introduce a broader range of products that continue to get better time after time. I also think that for us, it's an opportunity to expand into new product categories. So you've seen this a little bit. We started with men's boots. We've added on women's boots. We've done men's dress shoes, but really only done that in a small way. Looking ahead to the future, I hope that we're actually operating in multiple categories of footwear, and that each version of that, the Thursday version, is something that is just awesome. Where if it's a rain boot or a hiking boot, it's something that you're like, wow, this is a really, really good version of this. And we just become that go-to brand that people say, with Thursday, as long as I like the style, I know that the comfort, the price, the construction, the durability is going to be great. So it's as broad and kind of amorphous as I want us to be a leader in the mass market space. I really want Thursday to be there hoisting the flag and looking at the low quality guys and saying, you guys need to get your act together, and the overpriced guys saying, you guys need to be much more responsive to customers. That would be what I want to do. I wouldn't mind to get a little bit of sleep in between now and then. That would be great. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're still going to have to work really, really hard to get there, and we're okay with that, because this is something that you put enough time and effort and sweat into it, you realize that on the one hand, it's really hard. On the other hand, like, the world's your oyster, and it's really on us to just keep executing. If we can just keep running our race, ignoring the noise, listening to our customers, we'll be fine.
After spending the afternoon with Connor in Thursday's Manhattan location, my takeaway is this. They're a young brand, aggressively finding their way. It's easy to personify a brand or to attribute motive, be that positive or negative, but it's clear that these are good people who are learning about their craft and aren't afraid to try new things. Sometimes those things work and sometimes they don't, but I applaud them for their perseverance and tenacity. Going forward, I'll continue to review their products honestly, pointing out the hits and the misses, but I hope this gives you a better sense of the brand and the values behind Thursday boots. Thanks for watching.